Did you find a good place to hide? Now, what things go up? I can think of bubbles and balloons with helium in them, aeroplanes, helicopters, bugs, birds, a lift or an escalator. What other things can you think of that go up? The first part of our story today is about someone going up. And then the second part is about someone coming down, because what goes up must come down. If you're given a balloon with helium in it, you have to hold it very tightly. I'm sure you know that when filled with helium, a balloon floats in the air. It's fun to stand there and watch as the balloon floats higher and higher into the heavens until it totally disappears. It's also possibly something that I personally wouldn't recommend, because you never know when it's going to come down and land, and it could be dangerous. And it can also be quite sad if you let it go by accident or if you're not ready. In the first story today, it comes from the book of Acts, and we learn that Jesus is ready to return to heaven. When Jesus came back from the dead, he appeared many times in many different places. His friends were hiding in a locked room, so the men who killed Jesus couldn't find them. Then, all of a sudden, Jesus was there in the room with them. They were frightened. They were confused. They thought he was a ghost. But Jesus said, "Don't be afraid. It's really me. Look, here are the marks and the nails made in my hands, and the cut from the soldier's sword made in my side." Then Jesus joined them for dinner and ate a bit of food to prove he wasn't a ghost at all. A few weeks later, his friends were out fishing. They couldn't catch a thing. Then, all of a sudden, they heard a voice from the shore calling, "Throw your nets over to the other side of the boat." And when they did, they caught more fish than their boats could hold. "Wait a minute," said Peter. "That's the same thing that happened all those years ago when Jesus asked us to follow him. Oh, it must be him on the beach." And all of a sudden, Peter jumped into the sea, clothes and all, and swam back to shore. The other friends followed as fast as they could. When they arrived, they discovered that Jesus had done some fishing too. He was cooking fish on a hot fire. They smelled delicious. "Dry yourself off. Sit down by the fire," Jesus said. "Let's have a picnic right here on the beach." A few weeks passed, and at last it was time for Jesus to leave, to go back to heaven and be with his Father. So he took one last walk with his friends up a hill near the Lake Galilee, where their adventures together had begun. "I've got to go now," Jesus said, "and there's something I want you to do. I'll send you a special helper, God's own Holy Spirit, and with his help, I want you to tell my story to the world. Start in Jerusalem and don't stop until everyone has had a chance to follow me. And if you ever feel scared or alone, don't worry. Just talk to me and I will be with you, I promise." Then, all of a sudden, a cloud wrapped itself around Jesus and carried him into the sky. His friends stood and stared, their mouths opened, their eyes filled with tears, until two angels appeared and spoke to them. "Don't be sad," the angel said. "One day Jesus will come back in the clouds, just as you've seen him go." So off the friends went down the hill into the whole world to tell the story of Jesus. I don't know how all of this looked, but in my imagination, I can see the disciples standing there watching as Jesus ascended higher and higher until he disappeared from view. Were the disciples sad? Maybe they were a bit confused. But the Bible tells us that when Jesus had gone up into heaven, the disciples worshipped and praised God and returned to Jerusalem with such great joy. They continually prayed in the temple, praising God, telling everybody what had happened. Let's spend a moment thinking about that part of the story. They'd just been having a meal together. They'd gone out to the Mount of Olives outside Jerusalem and were gathered together, asking Jesus about whether this was the time for him to be the sort of king they were expecting him to be. When he gives them a new job to do and he leaves them. Imagine that you are one of the disciples on that mountain, on that hill with Jesus. And I want you to take your piece of paper and draw the scene from your point of view, from the first chapter of that book of Acts, from that story. I'll see you in a bit.